Welcome to Real Learning with Real People, where we learn from authentic and remarkable people in order to enhance the lives of our listeners. I'm Ken King, and I truly appreciate you joining me to learn today. This show was created in order to learn from and connect with people who have great lessons and stories that will positively impact listeners from all walks of life. In these unscripted conversations, we dive into the upbringing of our guests in order to really gain an understanding of their framework for life and who they are. Then we walk alongside them as they show us how that framework has impacted them in what they do. This is intentional because when we understand that who we are and what we do are different, we can really start to see how they are connected to performance, learning, creativity, and inclusivity. Now let's jump in as we chase some real learning from some real people. Now, the leadership skills required to coach a university varsity athletics team are multifaceted, but different than those required to be at the helm of a national level program. That's one reason why capturing success and helping to grow people at both levels is so impressive. My guest today has done just that. With a resume of successful outcomes, Coach Carly Clarke goes beyond that to build culture and relationships that truly matter. Carly's a native of Halifax, Nova Scotia, and received an MBA from Dalhousie to add to her Bachelor of Science that she received from Bishop's, which was also where she spent her playing career. Her resume is dotted with medals of all colors in the Ontario and Canadian championships, as well as multiple on the international stage with Canada's women's national teams. These include a silver medal performance at the 2016 FIBA Americas U18 Championship and a gold medal at the 2015 FIBA Americas U16 Championship. Now in this conversation, we dive into the great learning and perspective that she has from her years of coaching, culture, and her mindset on learning, but we also talk about how to create opportunities for women to pursue and succeed in leadership positions. Carly's super authentic. She shows up for us in this conversation in a great way, and here's my conversation with Coach Carly Clarke from Ryerson University and Canada Basketball. Carly Clarke, how are you today?
Pretty good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm running back-to-back Zoom and in-person meetings now, and navigating that world averagely at best.
It's nice to do anything in person these days, I think. So that's the positive of it.
Totally. I make excuses for it now. It's like, hey, I just have one quick question for you, Ken. And I'm like, great, let's go get coffee.
Totally.
So a lot of the people that are going to watch this episode probably already know you as a basketball coach and probably affiliated with many of your professional experiences. And I think one of the cool things that we could probably do today is give them a little bit more insight into who you are and how it's helped you find success in different aspects of your life, basketball included. But I know there's a few other things to you besides just stepping on the basketball court and coaching basketball all the time. And we really make a point of separating people as much as possible from what they do and understanding who they are. So I'm looking forward to this conversation because I think that especially in my circles of the basketball community, there's a lot of people that don't know a lot about who you are. And I think that this is a cool opportunity to maybe connect some of those dots for them.
Sounds good. Hopefully some new insights in there somewhere.
Oh, we'll find something. But as I said to you before, I'm trying not to cry on 2 episodes in a row. So the previous episode cried on. I'm just going to do my best today. Just no tears.
Great.
That's not a challenge though. So we like to start with just asking you to tell a little bit about what growing up was like for you, a little bit about what the house was like, go into as much or as little detail as you would like on that, and just give us an idea for your framework of life that you got from growing up.
Well, that could go in a lot of different directions, but we'll see where we take it. Well, I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, so that certainly guides who I am today as a proud Maritimer, and probably a pretty laid back personality in a lot of scenarios. But yeah, grew up in Halifax, which is a great city, was a great city. I don't spend as much time there anymore as I would like. But that Nova Scotia is still very much home for me. Have one sister, 2 parents. Our family has been close, but not like ridiculously close by any means, but strong family background. I remember the end of grade 2, we moved from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. It felt like it was really far at the time, but now that I know the geography of it, it was really like a 10-minute walk. But when you're 7 or 8, that feels really, really far, and you don't know your way around. So you don't know the difference. And your friends change, and your school changes, and your, just everything around you changes a little bit. But I mentioned that move because it was, in some ways, potentially helped create this path. Maybe would have ended up on it anyway, but was a street hockey player until that time, and then moved to a neighborhood that probably had a few more, lots of kids my age in both neighborhoods, but a few more girls my age in that new neighborhood, and but still boys and girls. But basketball was the sport that you played on the streets there, as opposed to hockey. And so the friends that I was surrounded by drove the sports that I got into, I think, from that point on. So yeah, we had a nice house, great neighborhood, had a basketball hoop in the driveway. That became a key point for kids in the neighborhood on lots of Friday nights, Saturdays, Sundays, whatever, just playing pickup in the driveway, breaking the neighbor's window from time to time. My sister and I were remembering that the other day, actually, just because where it was and where the ball would bounce. So yeah, took that in a random direction, but those are some facts that stick out for sure.
Awesome. I am always so intrigued by everybody from the Maritimes, period, full stop. It's so, I know that Mike McKay, and he's been on the show, and hearing his stories, which I realize come from a different time, no offense, Mike, than your stories. And a couple other people we both know, and friends of mine, all Maritimers, and I could just listen to the different nuances forever. And I'm nervous for all the trips that many people have said, like, when you come out, we've got to do this, and so on and so forth. And a lot of the things that they say we're going to do scares me.
Like what? I mean, you're probably going to need multiple trips to check everything off the list, but
yeah. And I guess a couple examples would be, I can't even remember what the one thing's called. And I can't remember if it's Nova Scotia or not, but there's something to do with a shot and a fish.
Oh, that's Newfoundland, getting screeched in. Yeah.
Okay. So that was one. Yeah. And it was Newfoundland, now that I think of it. A couple people have talked to me about the drive from Antigonish to Halifax, and how it's important that I experience that at least once in my life. And that makes me nervous, just because I'm I have no idea what could be on a drive from Antigonish to Halifax that I have to experience. But I have a lot of visions in my head of like Chucky and other terrifying things that could occur.
There's got to be some St. FX people that are steering those opinions, because not that many people make that drive unless you're associated with St. FX, or on your way to Cape Breton, I should say.
It is 100% St. FX people. Yeah. Great people. But
I'm sure. Yeah.
But now that I think about it, because of the type of great people they are, that's also probably part of why I'm nervous on their recommendation to do the drive. I could see them plotting something about the drive at that time, for sure. Now, probably the most on the spot that I put guests on this show is the following question. And you can pass if you want. And I've had guests pass, so you won't be the first. If you had to describe your mom in one word, what would that be?
Who can describe their mom in one word?
Most of the guests most people cheat it, actually. Very few people stick to one. They're usually hyphenating like 8 words together.
Yeah, exactly. I think, passionate came to mind. Trailblazer a little bit came to mind. So that's already 2.
You can keep going if you want. Now I'm just curious.
Well, my mom ended up stop working around when I was grade 9, but was tremendous in her career and what she did, and life decisions. To follow her path, and had a big impact in what she did. She was she did a degree in radio and television from Ryerson, actually. So that's kind of fun, full circle. But, was a successful executive, fundraiser, marketer, all of those things. And, I think it just normalized women being successful for me.
And now I'm so glad that I let you go past the one word, because
there you go.
we can definitely pull on some of that moving forward. Now, what about dad?
Also passionate, driven. Look, already at 2 right away.
Yeah.
Hardworking. Yeah, he had a really, really successful career, and just continued to find new ways to grow and get better, and support us. So, both my parents were really supportive of both my sister and I and our different journeys that we took, and continue to take. So I'd probably add supportive in there for both of them.
I really like that. And I'm not seeing that it's a coincidence that some of those words that cross both parents are also maybe words that I and others would use to describe you. And do you feel that kind of pull towards certain things? So for example, like passionate, like is passionate part of your coaching philosophy or part of how you pursue what you do?
I think it for sure is for both. I've been really fortunate to, find something that I love doing and now get paid to do it, and have just had continuous opportunities to continue to do that. So, anytime you get an opportunity to work with something you love, I think it makes it really, really enjoyable. So, that certainly comes through in what I do and how I do it. And, I think it, my passion shows differently in different moments in different ways based on my personality, but I think it's certainly there for me in life and in the profession.
Okay, I want to go a little deeper into that. When you say your passion shows differently in different ways because of your personality, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think people would naturally associate passion with like extroversion and consistent energy and rah-rah. And I think I have those moments, but I don't think that's how my passion always shows through. I definitely on the sidelines in practice in games have emotional moments and, would show through in that way. But I think it shows through more in my preparation, my work ethic, how I show up every day, consistency, those types of things where I'm just constantly striving to be better.
Oh, I love that. I feel a lot of alignment with that for myself, often misconstrued as, for me, I'm speaking to my experience, where because it's not like shouting, jumping up and down, hard celebration, big crashes of anger, like because there wasn't that in my coaching and in business and in personal life. It's like there are some people that really do read that, in my experience, as uncaring, even sometimes, like they or always disappointed is I've had some players be like, why aren't you happy right now? It's like, I'm not unhappy. Well, you're not smiling. It's like, oh, I'm just thinking. Like I'm thinking. I'm doing my work my way. I'm doing my passion my way, I guess would be the way I would put it.
We had a bit of a running joke in our team room last year that's how compliments would come out for me when I would say, like, our rebounding was okay, not bad today. And they're like, whoa, like I said, it was good. Then it was like a huge celebration. So I can relate to that for sure.
And does that come from, can you connect that back to anything? Like, is there anything in playing sports growing up for you, or maybe siblings, where that really comes from? Because I know for me, I'm always measured because of some of those factors.
I don't know if there's any true moment from childhood or examples from that beyond maybe my own perfectionism or, striving for perfectionism. I certainly had the opportunity to be a part of some competitive moments and teams like all throughout my youth, really from when I started playing. So, I don't know that there's something that jumps out at me other than just that constant striving for, perfection, which is unrealistic, but just improvement. And I just always say basketball in particular, and all sports, but basketball specifically is an imperfect game. And that's what makes it amazing, because it's not 2-0 at the end of the game. It's, 60, 70, 80, higher, whatever, to another score because of the imperfections, at both ends and all phases. So, as I say that, there is that still striving for perfection in me. And I think that's really where it comes from. And wanting to, try and just be better at everything that we're doing as a team constantly.
That's so interesting to me that you self-identify, I guess I would say, as a bit of a perfectionist, because I know, and I'm curious about your experience inside and outside basketball, that I've worked with a lot of athletes, female and male, who struggle because of some of their perfectionist tendencies. They struggle in school, maybe not with grades, but they struggle mentally with how they approach their school because of their perfectionist tendencies. And I think that it could be wildly impactful for them to hear more people in leadership positions and more women in leadership positions who not only have some of those perfectionist type thoughts, but how they manage them. So have you created a strategy, or have you created a framework for how you approach that striving for something that is truly unattainable?
I don't know that I have, because
Okay.
it probably still causes some anxiety in different moments. But, I think it's just, trying to compare compare to previous days' work as an example, and identify the improvements that have been made. I don't know that I'm like truly a perfectionist, but I'm like constantly striving for that space. So, I think, maybe the strategy, we've certainly tried to employ it with our team, is just to celebrate the successes when they're there and make sure you spend some time with those, because it's, you're just going to constantly find the moments of imperfect or not good enough if you don't. And I know, I would say a few years ago, I would spend too much time with that and not enough time celebrating some of the milestones and achievements along the way. So that's probably the best strategy for me.
And that, have you felt or seen a marked improvement in that at any time, or has that just been something that you've really carried with you? Maybe it's a Maritimer coming out.
In the celebration piece?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there has been a marked improvement. I think there's more intention to it for me individually, but like also in coaching. And some of that comes from being more confident in myself and those types of things, to be able to be authentic and live in the moment and not get too caught up in what's happening next or what just happened.
Do you dislike, or are you indifferent to talking about yourself?
Dislike greatly.
I'm reading your body language now as I continue to ask you questions about yourself. just watching, and that's really I think that's a common trait in a lot of coaches, and in my opinion, take it for what you will, I think that's a trait in a lot of good coaches. I think because they're thinking so often about how to enhance the lives of others, that when it comes to kind of turning the camera or really highlighting themselves, or even just talk about themselves, it can be challenging. And I know for me, one of the biggest challenges in coaching was always my personal mental health. And not, I guess, just finding that time to think about myself a little bit. And without going, or I guess going into as much or as little detail as you'd like, have there ever been any moments where maybe that has been a challenge for you as well? And if you say no, that's totally okay. I won't feel like I'm on an island.
No, it definitely has. I think, you know, when I was getting into coaching, and as with so many people, you just put everything into it because you are so passionate about it, that it's easy to get lost in it and buried in it. And um, you know, I think that it can just become all consuming. So, you know, for me, going from a university season right into a national team season, right back into a university season, um, you know, that became fatiguing. I don't think it ever became a case of burnout, but really have been really fortunate to have some mentorship, some personal development, some professional development opportunities where um, I was able to learn about and subsequently prioritize some self-care to make sure that I'm my best self and also my best coach for our players. So when I'm going from national team to university to national team back and forth so consistently, you have to be really diligent and prepared around a lot of things, but you have to prioritize yourself in those spaces. And I think regardless of whether you're doing that as a coach or not, that's really important, because I think there's a perception that you're not a good coach if you're not always working, because there's always something that you can do. You know, I think there's a difference between that and, you know, as a coach, you do have to work different hours. If you expect to work 9 to 5, that's unrealistic. But do you need to work 18 hours a day? I don't believe that you do. So balancing and understanding that difference. So long tangent to saying, you know, never became a huge issue, but, you know, just the awareness of, you know, for me to want to have a long career, to make sure that I'm appropriately resting, prioritizing some personal time myself, etc., around just this nonstop schedule or ability to always be doing something related to work, was really important. And then I think, you know, when I started coaching, I was young and probably naive and just loved it. And then my teams got good. And then the pressure amps up when your teams get better, because the expectations that you have on yourself, and expectations from the outside as well, but they have on yourself, those things can mount and, you know, create some anxiety, or you're taking losses harder than you need to take them, those types of things. So I think you have to develop some skills around all of those areas to manage your own self-care and mental well-being. Not sure I actually answered your question or not, but
No, you definitely did. And if your tangent ever sucks, I'll just interrupt you. So
great.
no, I'm kidding. But how do you deal with pressure then? Because you've seen pressure come in different ways, though. And we're both, here's my almost every episode plug of Finding Mastery with Michael Gervais. Here's my Michael Gervais quote for the show, where we know that pressure is 100% an internal mechanism. So you've dealt, though, with different scenarios of pressure, whether it's with the university level team, whether it's with national team or other areas. So how do you manage pressure, maybe in each area if they're different, or overall if they're the same?
I think a couple different areas to assist with that. You know, the first one being preparation. You know, I think that's a critical piece to building your confidence, to being ready in those pressure filled moments. I don't know that you'll ever fully feel ready, but I certainly know that when I feel like we have a great plan, when we have spent appropriate time on preparation, and you can over prepare to a fault too. So I think there's like a balance on either side of that, but the preparation to build some confidence to be ready for those moments is critical. And I think for me, just a personal mindset of understanding that pressure is a privilege. And, the Washington Mystics talk about that all the time as they went on their WNBA championship run last year. That, and that I think we've heard that quote, maybe it's Billie Jean King, that, anyway, that's an aside. But pressure is a privilege because, if you're coaching not a great team or, you're in different situations, you don't get the opportunity to have pressure on you with those expectations. And like you said, it comes from yourself because your own expectations are going to far exceed, whatever's coming externally. And for me, it's exhilarating. So I try and, kind of ride the wave of that and reminding and reframing it of how it is a privilege. And it's fun, you're coaching in those games or in those moments that there's a little bit more on the line. There's some excitement that comes with that. It's that's where, one of the things I really love about it as a competitor.
Yeah. And I love when the guests that I have on the show have just this massive amount of alignment with how I think about things. It makes it really easy to just have the conversation around it. And I'm also getting abundantly aware that I need to try and have some people who I just vehemently disagree with. And on the Billie Jean King quote, and it definitely is Billie Jean King who said that. I actually have a bit of a pushback that I'd like to play with on her quote, because what would be better than me calling out a Billie Jean King quote on a podcast? And it's I've always wondered about the second part of the quote, just because I don't know that it's something that she would maybe even agree with today. And it's that it's the pressure is a privilege. It only comes to those who earn it. And it's the only comes to those who earn it part that I just have a little bit of, it is some friction there for me, because I know to experience pressure, you can actually create it without having earned it. In my experience, I believe that I've created pressure on myself and I haven't earned the pressure, quote unquote. And there's probably some semantics there, I think, and like what is earned and that kind of thing. But I'm curious about, just as I toss that idea out there, your thoughts on if pressure does just come to those who've earned it, or if we can kind of organically grow it in ourselves and convince ourselves of a pressure situation. And I don't think there's a right answer. I'm just spitballing right now.
Yeah, I think there's some merit to that point for sure. But I would relate it back to, either, probably not an ideal mindset for performance, or, maybe even around well-being. So I'm going to try and frame that a little bit better. So what I mean by that is, going back to the perfectionism aspect of things, that's not a great characteristic to have in a lot of ways, as you already touched on, because it can lead to self-criticism and different things like that for an individual athlete, for sure. So, someone that is a perfectionist is naturally going to put some pressure on themselves that, they probably haven't earned. But there's some negativity associated with that. So I think the right kind of pressure probably is earned, but not all pressure, to your point, does need to be earned.
Yeah. I think that tied that up nicely. And I think, as I kind of think about it a little bit more too, it very much is, the privilege part does still stand true, because the privilege part is, I think we can extend that even further beyond ourselves. I especially with some of the conversations that are going on in the world now about things like white privilege. I've had a couple episodes where we've talked about that with some really, really good guests. And I think that the privilege part is if you have the ability to have nothing else that is worrying you or causing you, if I kind of reference Maslow stuff, causing you harm to your basic needs or requirements to life or anything like that, if you have the ability to not have to worry about that stuff to the point where you can put a lot of pressure on yourself, earned or not earned, for a basketball game or for a test or anything like that, that is a huge part of the privilege piece, I think, which is really that like there's nothing else that is really applying strain to your psyche right now besides whatever you're putting pressure on yourself for. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I also tried to really stretch my talking out long enough to cover your coughing time.
Great, thanks. I'm just grabbing a fisherman's friend.
So on the note of pressure, I do wonder too if there's a gender difference there, and I want to ask this question because I've been asked it before, and I know how I've answered, and I'm curious about your thoughts. And let's narrow that down a little bit and put it in sport. So a gender difference for pressure in sport, I think, would be kind of a topic I would flow into.
Well, what first came to mind on that for me is how I related preparation to confidence. And I think there is a big gender difference in confidence. Women just don't exude confidence the same way that men do. So I think how you prepare for a pressure-filled moment can impact the confidence of, I'm obviously speaking specifically to athletes, but preparation to prepare our women athletes for a moment, and the way that you think about their confidence in that preparation, I think can make a big difference in how they're going to approach those pressure-filled moments. I certainly think that our student athletes at Ryerson, we have a wide range of personalities that deal with pressure very, very differently, and some that run to it and some that run from it. And I do think a lot of that does relate back to their own self-confidence, as much as the confidence that they've gained from our basketball preparation.
Yeah, and I guess I'm technically pushing back on myself now, but part of my answer in the past was I've kind of adapted and I've answered similarly in that I've definitely seen difference having worked at the university level with both people identifying as male and female. However, I also have lately started to caveat the answer a little bit by saying that I've found a lot more hidden struggle with pressure on the men's side of basketball. This is just my experience, than I have on the women's side, in my experience, where maybe they're seeking help more on the women's side or just expressing it more clearly. But I found a lot of male athletes who, when they bring it up to me, whether it's pressure, confidence, actually really whether it's any internal battle that they're fighting in sport or outside sport context, when they're actually bringing it up, it's at the breaking point. I've found that to be a more common theme in my experience in the leadership side of sport, where it's like and we could go down this topic of toxic masculinity and the different aspects of masculinity in sport that we really need to try to do a better job with as a whole. But I do see it being very different and not necessarily, in my experience, a bigger or smaller impact on either side.
And in fairness, I don't have a lot of experience with that one-on-one with male athletes to be able to provide a true comparison. And so much of that comes from observation and assumption and perception from watching how male athletes show up a lot of the time. And some exude confidence often as a front, perhaps. So I certainly could see those things being very true on both sides.
And that brings up a really interesting thought for me, which is shifting from the athletes or the people being led perspective to the leaders and the decision makers. And I have found a true, genuine confidence in many of the people, such as yourself, that I've experienced who are women in positions of leadership. And I have personally found that to be less common on the other side of the coin. And I'm not talking about sport. I'm not talking about male sport or female sport. I'm talking about positions of leadership across the board, where there's a level of confidence that the women, maybe I'm just fortunate, but the women that I've worked around in leadership positions, it's so honest and it's so earned. And I think I'm saying that as a really positive thing. And without rambling too much about it, I'm curious if you've really found, actually, no, I'm not curious if, I'm curious what kind of experience you've had in being a female leader in sport or being a female leader in general with your own confidence, because I see it so genuinely, and I'm curious about how you relate to it internally. That was one of the longest questions I've ever asked.
Well, you used the word earned, and I think I would relate it to that first off. I certainly recognized my increased confidence in certain spaces, but that certainly was not present throughout my entire career as a coach, which is now, I'm losing count, but like 13, 14 years as a head coach at the youth sports level. So I've gained a lot of confidence through successes and failures and reflection and all of those things. And I think that the women that put themselves out front, similar to how I do in different spaces, throughout this COVID time, an incredible number of Zoom webinars and sessions, I think that's been an easy space for more women to present, but I think we're still severely underrepresented because of, I think the ones that are out there have earned some confidence and have found their confidence, but I think there's still a lot that are tentative to enter the space for the same reason, because it's still largely male dominated, and that whole topic is at the forefront of the news every single day and in different spaces. So it's exciting to see more women stepping up with the genuine confidence that they have. But I do still believe we need more of that to just like widen the pool of people.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that confidence is such it's something that we value so highly but work on so minimally, both on the individual level and on group levels, where you see values or mission statements or general statements of wanting to give people more confidence, but then at the grassroots level, it's like, what are we actually doing? And is it earned? Because regardless of any demographic aspect, just putting people into any position does not confidence give, I guess would be the way I would put it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a danger there to false confidence in any respect. And I'm being careful with my words because I don't want to sound like I'm speaking out against anything, because I'm not saying that we shouldn't be trying to put more women into these positions and trying to really expand the opportunities, because I do believe in that. And it's something that I've found challenging to believe in publicly as a male, actually, from some male colleagues. But I do think that we need to start it really early in that leadership process, and not be trying to skip steps, I should say. And when I look at development of leaders, it leads me to the question that I'll pose to you, because it's too hard for me to answer, which is there anything that we can do for young women and girls, in your opinion, to give them earned confidence at an earlier age, so that it's not, as we know, it's much more challenging to learn new skills as we age. So that's not a skill that we're really trying to help them develop later on. It's something that we've instilled early.
Yeah, I think there's lots that we can do, and there's probably too many different directions that this could go in. One of them comes back to just more conversation around perception of how women present themselves. So, going back to the last point, there's lots of, research, but also just conversation now around, is a woman, arrogant or, overconfident, aggressive when they are exuding their confidence. I just think back to the vice presidential debate last week, which
that's exactly where I was going to
go down that path. But Senator Harris was very clearly not stepping back and not fighting back to not present an image of aggressiveness, in my opinion. So that's one example of, like, what does a strong female leader look like, and what are we accepting of? For the young girls, I think there's an incredible number of opportunities to, from like young ages throughout, to develop leadership skills and confidence to, I talk about celebrate successes, but recognize the ways in which they contribute and think, and create spaces for that freedom of thought and discussion, relating it specific to sport. As coaches, do we give our players a voice? How do we respond when they have a voice? Those are simple things, but you can do those things day to day and make a difference in what they have confidence in doing, and their perception of those things. And then, I think the more that we expose young women to the careers that are available to them, in sport, obviously I'm specifically speaking to, but there's such a wide range of opportunities in sport that some wouldn't even know about. So the more you can educate them on, and then mentorship, internship, providing those pathways. I've seen young women get head coaching positions perhaps before they're ready. And I have a problem with the term ready, because what is ready?
Yeah.
Who knows what ready is? I don't think ready exists.
Yeah.
But, now that there's more full-time assistant coaching positions in Canada and different things like that, like, how do we bring women along in those positions so they are prepared to undertake the changes that happen and the differences that you have to deal with when you become a head coach from being an assistant coach, as an example. So I think the more that, again, I'm basically repeating what you said, but provide some opportunities, all throughout their childhood, but specifically earlier in their career, to gain experience and, learn through successes and failures. I think the more success we'll have in creating that space.
Absolutely. And I don't think that you doubled up on what I said. I think that you put that actually in a much more concise and better way than I said it. But I would even add, we can do a better job of, if equity is what we're pursuing, which I believe that is what we're pursuing, we can do a much better job of helping women lead men as well. And
Mhm.
and I think I'll tell you a brief story, just because it connects to the thought, and it's that working in women's sport for a while, I went through the feelings that I think we can talk about a little bit more, or should talk about a little bit more, around it. Resentment's not the right word, but I had some negative feelings of, to use for lack of a better term, feeling leapfrogged by women, again, who I felt were quote unquote less ready. And I agree with you on the term, or the lack of applicability of that term, when I was more ready in my super biased perspective. And I struggled with that. And I had the feelings that I think a lot of men have around women in leadership. I had the feelings that I think a lot of white people have when we talk about race, where I felt negative about it. And then I worked through that. And I looked at the people that I know personally and what I would want for them, whether it was inside sport or outside sport, what I believe in terms of my worldview and what I want for the world and what I want for our sport and that kind of stuff. And when I aligned all that stuff together, it quickly became clear that I was the problem in having those feelings, and I needed to get through that, not that the system was the problem, or that those are all the easy thoughts that I think as men in this situation we might tell ourselves. um and and then I kind of went to the next level, which is like, well, wait a minute. I should definitely be competing against women if I want to coach women, but B, I should also be competing against women if I want to coach men. Like, we should really be seeing this happen on both sides. And I don't think it's for lack of ability by any means. And we've seen this in the pro level, and very, very slightly in the pro-am or semi-pro level, but not so much in the college and university level, where I know a lot of female coaches who are female, is what I mean by that, not coaches who coach females. I know a lot of coaches who are female who would be great coaches of males, and there is no pathway for that. And I think that's probably I don't know if that's our mountaintop or that's just our next step.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great and important point. And you opened, I guess, the story with saying help women lead men.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we actually need is to help men be led by women. And, that's the bigger thing. And I think that's one of the common, unintentional errors that we make, is that it's on women to be better at leading men as opposed to the other way around. So I think that's just an important reminder, and just a little piece of language that can make a big difference.
You're 100% right. And that framework is huge. I think we kind of touched on the masculinity piece earlier, and I think that's a conversation for another day, but it really is that angle. And I think I'm fortunate because I have, and without diving deep into my psyche, I have the majority of my mentors, the people that I trust and look up to, are women. I definitely have more women in that category. It's not a massive category, but of my tight circle of people that when at the end of the day, whose opinion really matters, who would I go to, who would I rely on, there's a lot more women. And I'm not just talking about my mom, hi mom, who I do love. I'm talking about colleagues in coaching and colleagues in academia and other and business. And I would, for whatever reason, find in many circles that that's a rarity alone for males, is how many of your mentors are female and how many of them are male.
Exactly.
And I believe in the power of mentorship a ton. And I think that's really where we can start helping males be led by females, is really the idea of, well, when was the last time you were led by a female? Ever?
Right.
Have you ever experienced it? Like, did you ever have a boss who was female? Did you ever have a coach? Like, anything like that? No. Did you ever have a teacher that you looked up to? Like, because not playing, I can't think of a better term than this, so I'm going to use it. Playing devil's advocate for the men in that situation. If you've never been led by females for a span of time, you don't even know how great it can be, right? And I guess it's kind of a chicken before the egg, right?
Yep,
It's like
exactly.
which one can we do first? But I do think the mentorship piece for men, really having more of those women that's like, oh, actually, I need some advice on this next business decision I'm going to make. Well, I know exactly the woman I'm going to call. Like you could
Exactly.
probably popularize the term, just like, you know what, I have a woman for that, or I have a lady for that, or whatever. Instead of being like, oh, you don't. I think that the common used term is just like, oh, I got a guy for that.
Yep.
You need a tailor? I got a guy for that. It's like, if we started finding more women that we would refer people to, that would probably help a little bit. Just to get off my soapbox, I'll give you a chance to
No,
talk now.
that's a great idea. I think it's a great point, and probably an idea, concept that we could push forward more.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a shout out now to Pat Pickard, who's a professor at Laurentian University in Sudbury, because that's who really comes to mind for me in that moment is Pat.
Nice.
And her partner Jeanette. So before I told you 45 minutes. That was a bold-faced lie, and I kind of knew that deep down. But I kind of want to go down this road in terms of your current, like, your roster and not anybody in particular, but just kind of your plans moving forward. There's been a lot of self-reflection time available to all of us over the last few months. Have you found a shift in the athletes that you work with? I guess in any direction, just in terms of how they're approaching their craft, because intentionally or not, I think a lot of people have had a lot of time to do internal work. So are you seeing any kind of shift in them?
Yeah, I think, there's not a general answer to that, because I think through that time and space that each individual has had, they're coming out of it in their a little bit more themselves, maybe is the best way to put it. So you have, as we return to training and we think about the unknown of this season in particular, you have the competitors who are driven by that side of things and the short-term goals, and just that perspective that motivation can vary for them during this time when there's no carrot there right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're from a Ryerson perspective, a 4th or 5th year athlete. Maybe I'm graduating, maybe I'm not. That's an interesting perspective. Then you have the ones that don't love the pressure or the expectation, that have come out of it clear-minded and are just enjoying being back together from a social aspect. And then you have the ones that really associate with getting better and the process, and then they're just there every single day taking full advantage. So that's like a really basketball specific view. I think there's been a lot of productive moments, working with university athletes. When you take sport away, that's been their identity, almost completely for the majority of their life. So, university level in Canada, at some point that's going to end and you lose that identity. So I think it's been a really, really powerful time for a lot to expand their identity. They don't need to lose sport and replace it with something else. But I think for their own mental well-being and health, the time to add to who they are, recognize the other things that they're passionate and driven about, that's probably been the most productive through this time and space for a lot of our individual players. And I think a lot of that has been unintentional, but very, very, very beneficial.
See, nobody's going to believe that I don't script some of this stuff, because it's almost impossible for me to not lead into the video that we just put out last week about separating yourself from your craft. And it was really, we were trying to put it out because it felt so valuable at a time where many people, athletes in particular, of all levels and in all areas, are, if they really closely associate who they are with what they're doing, then they're really struggling right now. And in my opinion, and I don't need you to comment on this if you don't want to, there's not nearly enough support at the institutional level for that. And it needs to be outreach support, not just, hey, there's still the counselor, or you can come talk to me anytime, and that kind of thing. It's just that that's not the nature of many of these people, is to say, hey, I'm really struggling. Like, I lie in bed till 1 in the afternoon, and I party more than I ever partied in my life because who I am is gone, and nobody's helping them work through those problems. We don't do a lot of this anymore, but in our one-on-one mentorship stuff, it's like, that's probably the most common thing, is just like, it's that feeling of losing a piece of yourself, and really trying to make it clear that no, you didn't lose a piece of yourself, because doing this was never you. It was something that you did. You are a person who plays basketball, not a basketball player. And coaches, I think, is the same thing, where it's like you're a person who coaches, not a basketball coach or a coach. And it's interesting to hear you identify that.
I think that perspective is a really interesting one, and it's one that I go back and forth on it a lot, because I don't think it's all bad to be a basketball coach or a basketball player or an athlete. But I think the not ideal is only being a basketball coach or only being a basketball player or an athlete, because then you're fully consumed. I think, we opened with talking about passion, and you find your passion in different things. Everyone finds their passion in different things. And, for me as a basketball coach, my passion is doing almost everything related to a basketball coach, but I am also passionate about other things. So, during this time and space, am I still a passionate basketball coach? For sure I am, but that's not all I am. And I think through this time, the time has revealed the other things that you're passionate about, that you enjoy doing, and you need to find those things, to your point. Otherwise you won't get up. You won't have, motivation is one thing, but that can fluctuate, but you won't have the discipline, to keep living too. So, I think it's okay for some of your identity, part of your identity, to be wrapped up in those things. But when it becomes the sole thing, that's when you can really lead down, I guess, a dangerous path.
Yeah, and I do the way that I put it, I think, is just semantics, and that's really the intent behind it. And I think really what we're talking about is just alignment. It's okay for a part of you to be being a basketball player if how you play basketball and how you approach basketball is aligned with the rest of who you are. Right. And that's what you're talking about with passion, where it's like, if basketball is a chore for you and you don't like working hard that much and you don't like being on a team, but you participate in basketball for whatever is motivating you otherwise, maybe scholarship or glory or something, that lack of alignment is going to be where there's a big drop off in a time like this, or when your career ends for various reasons and that kind of thing. But when you're aligned, when what you're doing is aligned with who you are, that's really where the magic happens, and it never becomes work. It never becomes anything less than an extension of who you are.
Exactly. That comes back, I think, throughout this time, people have been able to better connect with their purpose. And that's part of what drives you who you are. And that purpose can be in different areas, or, you could have more than one purpose, but what is your purpose for playing, for doing anything? So I think, for some athletes, this time has been really productive in that regard, to, further identify and unpack the purpose side of things. Again, especially as a student athlete who's going through 3, 4, or 5 years of their life and then moving on to the next thing, could be transformative.
Absolutely. And I think it's such an opportunity. That's such a great message, is the ability to use this as a transformative and an opportune time, and not something that is ruining your plan or like just the unfair implications on your life that it could have. It's leverage it, use it.
For sure.
I'm curious, just to wrap up, are you reading anything right now or listening to anything or watching anything that you would want to share? This is actually pretty selfish, so I just really want to know.
All of the above. So I just finished watching Ted Lasso on Apple TV.
Okay.
It is about an American football coach who is hired by a European or an English football club. So he goes to coach over there. It's a comedy, but it is also has some tremendous lessons on coaching. So it's only one season. Strongly, strongly, strongly recommend it. So that's what I just finished watching it actually. So that's up there.
Will you share how quickly you watch that, or is that something that you're a little embarrassed of?
Well, yes, but yes to both. I will say that it's only 10 episodes that are roughly 35 minutes long. So
okay.
You can imagine that you could get through it in a weekend.
Yeah.
Especially a long weekend, right? So
not speaking from experience, just a random amount of time.
Exactly. So that's roughly how quickly I watched it. I'm looking up the name of the book that I'm reading right now, because I do want to recommend it, but I can't remember what it's called. So you can.
Well, I can while you're pulling that up. I had a book. My desk is borderline built out of books here at home, but a guest on the show and a friend of mine, Matthew Dix, has a book that I think you'd really enjoy. It's called 21 Truths About Love, and it's written in lists. And he's a professional storyteller and school teacher, and he's a guest on the show too. So if you ever get around to listening to the show now that you've been a guest, then I would recommend starting with his episode, because he's just a very interesting. He's died a couple times and been brought back to life. He's been charged with different crimes. He's got a very unique experience. But the book 21 Truths About Love is just, it instantly propelled itself into, like, I've got like The Alchemist and The War of Art and Culture Code and a couple books that are kind of in my top 10. It literally just like slammed into the top 10 right away. And yeah, really unique book, written in list format too. So you feel like you're really ripping through it.
Great. I just wrote that down. My Kindle app's not loading for some reason. So
this is the opposite of a plug for you, Kindle.
Yeah. I also listen to JJ Redick's podcast pretty religiously, and a couple other mindless ones, but he's got a pretty good one right now that I enjoy. So I try not to make it all about, work and learning. There's a lot of that. Ted Lasso ended up being a bit of both.
Yeah.
So when I find those shows or listens or reads, I like them the most, I think.
Yeah, and that it kind of speaks to how I guess transcendent our coaching lives can be into the rest of our life, because it's almost impossible not to thread valuable things back and forth.
Exactly. I'm really annoyed I can't find the name of the book right now, but
if you send it to me, I'll put it in the description of the episode, so it pops up in there.
Okay. It's on unconscious bias, so it's got some pretty powerful stuff in it. Yeah.
And I don't know if you've had a chance to read White Fragility.
I have not.
It is kind of an unconscious bias general topic, but obviously very, very topic specific. And really, honestly, it changed my view of my race, or lack of, I guess, depending on your perspective of it,
right.
And how I've thought about race and spoken about race and that kind of thing. It was another book that, like, I finished reading it and I was kind of like, oh shit, like I have to rethink some things.
I've actually heard mixed things about that book, because it's written by a white woman.
Yeah.
So some of the workshops I've been a part of, one in particular suggested that the author was profiting upon
fair
the cause, or the yeah, basically the systemic racism that exists. So
Yep.
it's just an interesting perspective, but there's a lot of content out there right now that whether it's that or another that
Yep.
have some powerful perspective leading, and I have heard that about that one. Finally Loaded, the person you mean to be.
Okay.
Person you mean to
Person
be.
you mean to be.
Yep, by Dolly Chu. I think I'm pronouncing that correct.
Okay.
It unpacks unconscious bias in not just against like racial injustice, but in a lot of different issues and spaces. And yeah, it's basically around becoming, good at fighting your own biases and building some awareness around that.
Cool. Well, it's Prime Days on Amazon, so I'm going to add that to my cart.
Yeah.
2 quick thoughts. One, I do actually, I can definitely see that perspective that the person you talked about had on the White Fragility book. And 2, my response is always just, I don't know what the intent in the writing was, but what it did for me, I believe to be very valuable, positively. Right. So, but also 100% profited off it. Whether that was the intent or whether it was with malice is unknown to me, but definitely profiting a ton off of it right now.
Yeah.
I just plugged it, and I've probably plugged it on 2 or 3 episodes now. So at least the 100 and some odd listeners that subscribe to the show will get it. Now, I have one more question for you that's related to that topic, and then one more that has nothing to do with any of that stuff, and then I'm going to let you go because I know you're busy and have tons and tons of IPPs and practice plans and all that kind of stuff to constantly update. But the first question is, do you believe that as sport coaches who coach adults, I'll make it really narrow, that we should be required to champion social justice?
For sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad that that's aligned too, because would have been extended the episode a bit if you threw that back at me negatively.
I don't think it matters who we coach, but I think coaches are leaders and people that are out there and visible, and specific in basketball, work with a very diverse group of athletes and people. So I think it's critically important.
Cool. Okay, that was easy answer that I'm glad aligned with what I was expecting. Now, if somebody wanted to follow you social media wise or anything like that, and keep up with you, the team, that kind of thing, where would they go?
Well, I guess Instagram, Twitter, both our Ryerson Rams women's basketball are on there, as well as myself, Carly_Clarke on Twitter is the best spot. My tweeting is a little sporadic, but try and share some different stuff and try and get back to people that reach out. Awesome.
And for anybody listening, I would highly encourage you, especially if you're in that category of people that we talked about on this episode, where you're a young female who's thinking about leadership opportunities, has a bit of a hankering for getting involved in that kind of stuff, or just wants to learn a little bit more about it. I would encourage you to reach out to Carly, and I want to thank you, because we spent a few weeks trying to book this episode, and every time we talk, we spend a few weeks trying to book it because of our schedules. But I want to thank you for diving into the topics that we talked about today, because it's not topics that everybody would be willing to speak about the way that you have. But it again, to use the word alignment, aligns with what you said about those topics, which is that the more that you can stand up, the more that you can be at the forefront and be somebody who's mentoring and leading, the more that we can kind of perpetuate that same thing for not just young women and girls, but everybody. So I really appreciate you showing up the way you showed up for us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a great conversation, and happy to be a part of it.
Cool. And I have to make sure I plug that. Good luck in whenever, wherever, however, Olympics and seasons and stuff like that happen, because we'll all be watching, and I want to make sure that everybody who's watching and listening to this knows that they should be following our Canadian women's basketball team whenever the Olympic stuff comes along.
Appreciate that. Hopefully we'll be in Tokyo next July.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you take care.
Thank you.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.